On this episode of Crime Scenes with Coffee Beans, the case of the nurse who was so worried about his painkiller addiction being found out, he was willing to kill to cover it up. Coming up right after this. Hello. Welcome to Crime Scenes with Coffee Beans. I am your host, Belinda Brady, and welcome guys. Welcome to the podcast where I talk about Australian crime, Australian murders to be more specific. And thank you so much for tuning in. I appreciate every single one of you. And this is a one-woman podcast. I do all the research, all the talking, all the editing, and of course, drinking the coffee. Now, for those of you who might be new to my podcast, I pretty much talk about murders and crime as I'm drinking coffee, and I very much encourage you to do the same. And as I always do, we'll do a quick roundup of where you guys are listening to me from. So top 3, we have Australia, followed by New Zealand and the US coming in at number 3. And we've also got some people from France and Turkey who have joined the gang, and of course Ireland and United Arabs and Singapore. And I love that. Keep coming to me, guys. I love it. And of course, real quick, if you want to subscribe to me, you can. And as a little incentive, I offer bonus episodes of ghost stories. If you think us Aussies can be nasty, wait until you meet our ghosts. And half of them, more than half, I would say, I wouldn't even know about. So let's discover them together. Just jump on the website on the Buzzsprout and hit subscribe, and we will go from there. Okay, straight up, I will say this episode might be distressing for some listeners. So please, listener discretion is advised. Okay, what am I drinking? I am drinking Pepsi Max. It is so hot. We are well and truly right in the swing of summer here. As I am recording this episode, it is 32 degrees Celsius in my part of Australia. That translates to about 89 degrees Fahrenheit for those who measure their temperature in Fahrenheit. It is hot, so no hot coffee. And plus, I've already had 2 big coffees today, so I need to not have as much if I want to have a sleep tonight, because it is the afternoon as I'm recording this. So let's get stuck right into it. The episode I have titled Roger Dean, the Killer Nurse. And my sources for this episode are coroners.newsouthwales.gov.au and murderpedia.org. Nurses, they're here to help care for you, aren't they? They're here to help you get better. They are a friendly ear for you to talk to, and they are there generally to make your life and your healing journey better. And as we know, nurses play a role in all kinds of healthcare, from hospital nursing to helping you in your local doctor's office. They're an essential part of our healthcare, and we would be lost without them. And they are an essential part of our healthcare structure. And for those who work in aged care facilities, which we call in Australian nursing homes, most of them, all of them, if not, are angels in disguise. Now, they help their elderly residents who can't be at home anymore for various reasons, such as declining health, dementia, Alzheimer's. They help them. They help them with their meals and their medications and toileting. And for the most part, they are there with good intentions. And that's what we want for our elderly, don't we? We want someone who will care for them and help them and genuinely care about them. But what happens when one nurse is a devil in disguise and would go as far as arson and murder to cover his little secret? Well, settle in and let's learn all about this killer nurse, Roger Dean. Let's go. Okay, Roger Dean was born in Australia in 1976, and he qualified to become a registered nurse in December 1996. In Australia, to become a registered nurse, or an RN as we call them, you must pass a university degree, and this takes around 3-4 years. Roger worked in a few fields of health once he had graduated, such as community health and drug and alcohol rehab. And in 2007, he had a dispute with his then supervisor. This dispute was about a note that he had made in a patient's file, and Roger didn't agree with being pulled up on this. I don't know what the note was. I couldn't find that out, but it was enough for the supervisor to go, hey, this isn't cool. Roger didn't like it. He didn't agree with it. He said his supervisor was being unfair and condescending. And not long after, this supervisor found her car damaged in the parking lot. Someone had thrown paint all over it and put screws in her tyres. Now, she instantly suspected Roger, instantly. And she actually saw the same colour that had been thrown on her car on his desk. So this was around July 2007. And he left not long after. When he had this dispute and whatnot, he left not long after. So if there was going to be an investigation into who did this to the car, and they thought it was Roger, he wasn't there no more to investigate. And Roger did later on admit that it was me that threw the paint and put the screws in my supervisor's tyres. So Roger moved. He moved to a hospital called St John of God in Sydney, and he mainly worked night shifts, which ranged from 10 to 12 hours in length. Now, in June 2011, Roger was found to be drug affected while working a shift at the St John of God Hospital. According to the records, a patient who was also a police officer had found Roger in the medication room. Now, his clothing was dishevelled and he had white foam or spit forming in the corner of his mouth, and he was talking slowly. And when he did talk, his speech was slurred. Now, the patient told staff, and the after-hours manager was notified. Now, every hospital and healthcare facility that runs 24/7 does have an after-hours nurse manager, someone there to supervise and to fall on if something happens. Now, it's worth mentioning here that the medication/treatment room is not a room where just anyone can walk in. You need access. Staff need access to enter the room, and to do so, they swipe their ID card. Now, drugs of addiction, Schedule 8 drugs known as S8s, and that's what I will refer to them as, which can include morphine, oxycodone, and fentanyl, are kept under lock and key in these medication rooms, and staff to access these, you have to unlock them. They're in a safe, so you need a key to get them out of the safe. And 2 staff members have to check and sign off on them every single time they are administered. This is not only for patient safety, but also on the chance that the drugs go missing, and there's a paper trail. An audit will be conducted, and you can see, okay, these 2 nurses checked what happened here. So it's not only for patient safety, but for a paper trail in case anything does go missing, and something that they can work back from. Now, the after-hours manager at St John of God Hospital, a woman by the name of Karen Bailey, spoke to Roger about the concern this patient had raised, and she noticed he appeared sedated and he was slurring his speech. She sent him home immediately and insisted that he not drive. I'm not sure how he got home, but she was responsible enough to go, no, you look like something's not right. You should not be driving. On the 21st of June 2011, Roger was interviewed by the director of nursing and the nurse unit manager of the ward that he worked for about this incident, and Roger told them that he had a bipolar disorder, his doctor had changed his antidepressant medication, and it had adversely affected him on the day and shift in question. and that he had since seen his GP and he had his medication changed. So that's why he was acting funny. Roger also told them that he had a major depressive illness, such as bipolar, and was seeing a clinical psychologist each fortnight. The director of nursing requested Roger get a letter from his doctor clearing him for work and advised Roger he would be suspended until he did. Now, Roger's doctor backed up the change of medication story and his mental health claims to a degree, but he never mentioned that Roger had bipolar or was seeing a specialist mental health caregiver, and he certainly wasn't seeking out specialist mental health treatment. But Roger was allowed to work again. The doctor gave him the all clear. The Don advised Roger that he was to be taken off night shift and put on day shift so he can receive appropriate supervision during the day, because there's more staff and there's managers around. And 3 days after being advised of this, Roger gave his resignation. At this stage, Roger was living with his partner, who owned and ran a cheesecake shop franchise in a Sydney suburb called Quakers Hill. Roger took it upon himself one day to visit the Quakers Hill Nursing Home, which was near his partner's cheesecake shop, and asked if they needed any nursing staff, which they did. Now, Roger handed in his registration and his resume, which didn't mention his work at the St John of God Hospital, and his most recent nurse referees were from years earlier, so he had a gap. But it didn't matter because the nursing home didn't check any of his referees. They didn't call any of them. And Roger was given a role where he worked mainly night shifts. He started this position in September of 2011. Now, at this nursing home, at the Quakers Hill Nursing Home, only one registered nurse was rostered to work night shift. So when Roger worked night shift, he was on his own. That meant he had unsupervised access to the medication room, and he was unsupervised during his shift. And not only did he have unsupervised access to the medication room, he was the only one with the key. So any other assistants in nursing who were on the floor, they don't have keys because they cannot give out medication. They don't have the qualifications to do so. So it was on Roger. So if Roger was in there on his own in the medication room, he could lock the door behind him and be absolutely confident that no one was coming in, as he was the only registered nurse on shift. Now, Roger was on a 3-month probationary period, which is standard with most jobs in healthcare here in Australia, and his supervisor and the lady that hired him, a woman by the name of Miss Stoffen, had been made aware of some issues with him when some other staff verbally expressed their concerns about Roger to her. On the 16th of November 2011, Roger worked a night shift with 4 assistants in nursing, and we call them AINs here, and that's what I'll also call them for this podcast. And all 4 AINs noticed Roger spent a lot of time in the medication room on his own, often with the door closed. Now, this stood out as unusual, and because no other nurse really did what Roger was doing. Now, like I said before, AINs can't dispense or allocate medication, so they generally do not go into the medication rooms and they don't have access to it. So they couldn't see what he was doing in there. But one managed to get into the medication room towards the end of this shift, and she saw Roger in there. Now, she saw that he had a trolley near him, and she saw blister packs, medication blister packs on this trolley. and sticky tape had been wrapped around these blister packs. When she asked Roger about it, he excused this as other nurses had ripped the packets and he was just fixing it up. A camera that was outside the medication room recorded everything that goes on in the outside the medication room on the floor 24/7. During Roger's shift, he was seen entering the medication room 36 times. 2 hours all up. He spent 2 hours in that medication room. Now, maybe Roger knew he was about to be found out. Like maybe he knew he'd aroused enough suspicion in this AIN to go, shit, I need to start backtracking and covering my tracks here. So he left a note for his supervisor saying he'd be happy to run fortnightly supervision for the other nursing staff. I don't know the end game here, but my guess would be, shit, I need to start backtracking. Let's offer something to show everyone what a top guy I am. Now, nursing homes by Australian law and any other healthcare provider that does provide drugs of addiction such as endone and oxy must have registers for their drugs of addiction. Each entry must be signed by a witness who is a registered nurse, and every drug must be accounted for. And the nursing home, Quakers Hill Nursing Home, had 2 drug register books stored with the S8 drugs, and each book was audited daily. As is policy and procedure in Australia, audit these drug books every single day. On the 17th of November, the morning after Roger worked a night shift, a nurse and an assistant, an AIN, so they can help audit, I believe, they cannot dispense the medication. So a registered nurse and an assistant in nursing commenced an audit on the Schedule 8 drugs in the nursing home. And they noticed that the counts for the endone did not tally with the numbers given against patient names, meaning what was accounted for in that drug register versus what was actually on stock in hand didn't match up. Drugs were missing. They also noticed endone was missing from blister packs and boxes, and they checked with the nurse who had run an audit the day before, and she confirmed nothing was amiss and everything was fine. So the drugs would had to have gone missing the night before when Roger was on shift. They immediately contacted Miss Stoffen about the missing endone. Another RN audited the drug register again that same day at about 8:30 p.m. and they found all up 237 endone tablets and 1 tablet of Capanol missing. Now these poor nurses panicked, as in all their time working in a nursing home, they had never come across this. Like 237 endone tablets is insane. We're not talking 1 or 2, like 237. That is a massive amount to take in one hit. And they contacted Miss Stoffen again, who had confirmed with these nurses that she suspected it was Roger who had taken these drugs, and to contact the police, which is mandatory when S8 drugs go missing in any healthcare setting. If any S8 drugs go missing in Australia, in a healthcare setting such as a hospital or a nursing home, you need to contact the police. Now, Roger, not quite knowing that his gig was up, arrived at 10:15 to start his shift, completely unaware of what was going on behind the scenes. Now, the police arrived at the nursing home at around midnight and Roger let them in. Now, the nurse in charge that night, Miss Matteo, had also helped with the audit, talked to the police but didn't mention that they all suspected Roger. Now, the police were called away, but they promised they'd return. Now, Miss Matteo left after waiting. So she was meant to finish her shift, but she was waiting for the police to come back. And when they didn't come back, she had to leave. And when she called them, they kept telling her they had more urgent things to attend to. So before she left, she took the opened endone packets and put them in Miss Stofen's office and locked the door. And as Roger was the only registered nurse on shift for that night shift, she had to give him the medication room key. She had to. There was no one else there that she could give it to. As she was leaving, she had staff begging her not to leave as they were too scared to be left alone with Roger, but she felt she had no choice. She felt her hands were tied and she had to go, and the police had promised that they would return the next day when the managers were on shift and they could talk about the missing drugs and go from there. So the night went on, and around 4 a.m, a nurse working an AIN working with Roger had a cigarette break. And as per usual, she left her cigarettes and lighter between the ice machine and the wall in the dining room. At some point, Roger went to the dining room and took her lighter. And at around 4:35 a.m, Roger told two other nurses on shift to go take a break, saying, "I want you off the floor and I'll look after this side. Get off the floor." They refused. He then approached another two nurses saying, "Why don't you guys take a break? You deserve it." They both took the opportunity and went to the TV room for a break. Roger then went to the A2 wing of the nursing home at around 4:51 a.m. He went into Ward 19 and found an empty bed where he used the lighter he stole from Ms. Watts to set fire to the bed sheet. He left the door open and returned to the front foyer. He was caught on CCTV walking back to the front foyer at around 4:53 a.m. near the nurses' station, and as he did, the fire panel started to flash and all the fire doors closed. The fire alarm sounded at this time too, some 2 minutes after he lit this fire. Now, not caught on camera, but we now know before he returned to the nurses' station, Roger lit another fire in Ward 3 of the A1 wing. So he lit a fire in A1 and A2. He had found a resident called Molly looking for a toilet, so he helped her get to a toilet, and then when finished, took it back to her bed and set the sheet of a nearby bed on fire. So we now have two fires going. In Ward 3, where he had just lit this second fire, were two residents, a woman by the name of Dorothy Sterling, who was 80, and another woman by the name of Dorothy Wu, who was 85. Both of these women suffered from Alzheimer's and both were bedridden. Another resident, Bertha Leonard, was also in this room/ward. Now, as he had done with the first fire, Roger left the doors open as he left, and we all know leaving doors open when there's a fire gives the fire oxygen and it feeds it. It makes it bigger. Now, the nurses on the floor heard the alarm and inspected the fire panel, and the indicator was telling them that it had picked up a fire in the A2 wing. Now, security also called, which was linked to the fire alarm, confirming, yep, you've got an alarm, you've got a fire in the A2 wing. And at 4:53 a.m, 3 of the nursing staff entered the A2 wing, and one later returned, waiting for the emergency personnel to arrive. While she was waiting, the other two nurses went towards Ward 19 where they saw the smoke coming from. They saw flames climbing the walls and closed the door to contain the fire. They then joined other staff in evacuating the residents of the A2 wing, and they didn't yet realise there was another fire going. Now, they didn't check the panel because they had contained that fire in A2. They thought that was the only one. So they were getting the residents out. They thought they'd contained it. They were in there with their limited knowledge of what was really happening. They were doing the right thing. Now, the firefighters arrived at around 5 a.m. They were not escorted to the fire panel indicator panel to check for further alarms, and they were taken to the fire in A2. And again, no one was aware of the fire in A1 yet. Residents of A2 were being evacuated. The CCTV captured smoke coming from Ward A1, and a firefighter heading back to the truck to update communications saw smoke coming from the A1 wing. Now, miraculously, at this point, a resident appeared from the A1 wing who had managed to walk out of the fire. And she had no recollection of, couldn't tell anyone what was going on, but it was adamant at this point that there was a fire well underway in A1 and it was much worse than the fire in A2. Around 5:02 a.m, more fire trucks were sent to the nursing home from neighbouring suburbs, and firefighters continued to evacuate residents from A2 and then moved on to A1, where they commenced a search and rescue. The smoke was so thick in A1 that the firefighters had zero visibility, even in their fire suits, and they could hear moaning and coughing coming from the still trapped residents, but they couldn't see anything. And the heat was so intense for the firefighters, some had to drop to the floor from the heat. This was even in their protective fire suits, so you can imagine how awful it would have been for those residents. Now, the fire was burning the roof, and the firefighters were determined to save who they could in the little time that they had. Now, many of these residents were bedbound and sick and confused and utterly terrified. Part of A wing was being reduced to rubble, with the roof partially collapsing, and staff and firefighters and police were trying to get to as many residents as they could. A triage area was set up on the lawn of the nursing home, and many of the evacuated residents were receiving care and oxygen from ambulance staff, police, nursing home staff, and civilians who had run over to see what they could do to help. Residents who were affected were transported to hospitals all over the region, all over Sydney, and the fire was finally extinguished. And when it was, the bodies of Dorothy Sterling and Dorothy Wu were found in their beds, and another resident, Alma Smith, was found. All were deceased. Meanwhile, on the front lawn of the nursing home, as fireys are putting this fire out, as they're finding the dead bodies of the residents, and more residents are receiving help and care on the front lawn, guess who was giving an interview to the media? Yep, Roger. He told media there was a fire and I did what I could do to get the residents out. It's a bit overwhelming, but we got a lot of people out, and that's the main thing. But what Roger didn't tell the media was, not only was it him who lit these fires, but he managed to get back into the nursing home to get the S8 drug books. The same drug books that he had in a yellow bag he was holding while being interviewed by the media. Now, he managed to convince a firefighter to let him back in, who escorted Roger back into the building so he could get his bag. And he somehow managed to get into the medication room, which was still standing, and get the drug books, the S8 drug books. He then went home, ripped up the S8 drug books, and told his partner he had to go back to the nursing home. And on the way, they stopped at the cheesecake shop that his partner owned. And while he was there, Roger threw the ripped up drug books in the bin. Now, police were quick in pinpointing this on Roger, very quick. And they were investigating him at this stage. So he'd gone home, ripped up the drug books, went to his partner's workplace and chucked these drug books in the bin. And meanwhile, because of the report the night before of the missing drugs, and everyone kind of saying, yeah, we think it was Roger, they were very, very quick to zero in on him. And when he was taken to hospital for smoke inhalation, the police paid him a visit. He initially denied any involvement, But the police said they wanted to interview him again and for him to come down to the station to be formally interviewed. When he was discharged from hospital for his smoke inhalation, he went to the police station where he was interviewed and again tried to deny it for a bit. But once he was told he was the main suspect and the police had so much info on him, he changed his tune and he confessed, telling police, "I used a cigarette lighter and I lit an empty bed and it got out of control and I got really scared because I didn't think it would spread so quickly. I just wanted to light something. I just wanted to set light to something. It just happened." He then went on to tell police, "I just wanted to light something. I just wanted to set a light to something. It just so happens there was an empty bed and I did it to that." When the police asked him, were there any residents in the room when he lit that second fire, Roger replied, "I think so, yes." And to cover the real reason for this horrific crime, Roger then went on to tell police that he felt he was under attack from evil and that he was corrupted with evil thoughts and that Satan himself had told him that night to light those fires, which is, of course, absolute bullshit. And despite admitting lighting these fires, he still denied stealing the painkiller medication. He denied stealing the endone. But once a search of his home was done, he was proved a liar. He was proven a liar again. The missing endone was found in his home, some in containers labelled Roger's prescribed medication, and in total they found 203 endone tablets, 28 part endone tablets, and 1 Capanol capsule. All of it was in his house. All of it was recovered. Sadly, in the days that followed, a further 8 residents who had been caught in the fire died of their injuries, taking the death toll to 11. Roger Dean was charged with 11 counts of murder and 8 counts of recklessly causing grievous bodily harm. He wanted to plead guilty to manslaughter, but the Crown rejected this, so he pled not guilty to the murder charge. He did plead guilty to 2 charges of larceny and the theft of prescription painkillers. In May 2013, he stood trial in the Supreme Court where he changed his plea to guilty. And in August of 2013, he was sentenced to life in jail without the possibility of parole. In sentencing Roger, Judge Megan Latham said, "The pain and terror suffered by all of the victims must have been horrific. A worse fate is difficult to imagine." More than 100 relatives of the victims attended the court hearing and they welcomed the news, with many hugging and crying, some punching the air, one yelling out to Roger as he was led away from the courthouse, "You'll get yours, you son of a bitch." And another one said to the waiting media, "Our memories aren't of a sweet lady who passed away of natural causes. We had to give DNA to know that that was our grandmother." Roger will see out the rest of his days in Goulburn Jail, New South Wales. He is not eligible for parole. The victims of the Quakers Hill Nursing Home fire are as follows: Dorothy Wu, 85, Alma Smith, 73, Reginald Green, 87, Lola Bennett, 86, Ella Wood, 97, Urbana Alpio, 79, Caesar Galea, 82, Doris Becky, 96, Verna Webke, 83, Dorothy Sterling, 80, and Nelty Valkay, 90. All these elderly residents had lives. They had lives and they had families who adored them. And they had friends and hobbies and things they loved to do, and they all died because their nurse was addicted to painkillers. And rather than face the consequences of his addiction, he would rather set fire to his workplace to destroy the evidence. At the time of this fire, a packet of Endone, if Roger had gotten it via a doctor, if he had gotten it legally prescribed by a doctor, would have cost him around 85 Australian dollars. All those innocent, helpless residents, people's mothers and grandmothers and great-great-grandmothers and friends all died. Families left in mourning for something worth around $85. And if Roger had come clean and said, hey, I have an addiction to prescription medication, I'm so sorry, I've done the wrong thing, and copped it and, took accountability, and he probably would have gotten some help, and these residents, these beautiful elderly residents, would not have died in such horrific circumstances. It is absolutely insane that was his way of thinking, and that was how he thought he could cover his addiction and his stealing of prescribed medication. And it's absolutely insane to me. It's absolutely heartbreaking, and something that these poor elderly people died in such a horrible way for something so insane. Something that people who aren't psychotic would ever dream of doing. It's just utterly insane to me. It's just mind-blowing. And to the families of the elderly residents that were killed in the Quakers Hill fire, in the Quakers Hill Nursing Home fire, I express my heartfelt sympathies, and may their memories be a blessing for you. I truly hope that is the case. And there you have it, guys. Another crime scenes with coffee beans done and dusted. Thank you so much for listening. If you do have an elderly person in your life, a nan or a pop or a great-grandparent, give them a hug and just tell them that you love them. They really are beautiful. And just this story has made me so sad and so mad. And yeah, if you do have an elderly person in your life, give them a hug, pay them a visit, have a cup of tea with them, have a chat. They would love it, I'm sure. And thank you again for listening. And as always, you're a rock stars. Thank you so much. I appreciate every single one of you. And until next time, my friends, stay safe, stay cool, and stay caffeinated. I will catch you all later.